Welcome to another Platinum Greatwyrm episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get. Welcome to a special mailbag episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where I, Adam, am sitting down with one of our Patreon subscribers, Gerald, who has generously become one of our patrons of Platinum Greatwyrm tier. That means that he's able to sit down and record an episode with us, and he decided that today we're going to be returning to the discussion on his homebrew mass combat rules, specifically the idea of mass combat feats. But it's been a little while since we've gone over it, and the last one was really crunchy as far as mechanics goes. So, Gerald, before we jump into a recap, how are you doing?
I'm good. I haven't had a chance to deploy the stuff that we've talked about. The party's been kind of buried in party-sized challenges for the past few months, and between lives and whatnot, we've had to shuffle a few sessions. So I think probably we're maybe a month away from our next big mass combat. So perfect timing.
Yeah, this is great timing then. This will work. So, and have you spoken with your co-DM about these changes at all?
Yes. Yep. So we did start to weave some of the stuff that we talked about in the last episode into the model that we use.
Okay, good. That's cool. All right. Well, let's jump into a quick recap of the mass combat rules. I'm going to bring them up on the screen. Now, my notes are not fleshed out because we did quite a bit of other conversations and tweaking and whatnot. So this is the original notes that I did not fill out here. You can see that there's a lot of emptiness here, but the very first thing that I wanted to go into, despite the fact that it starts with city options and fort options, I wanted to talk real quickly about armies first, right? Because we start off with, and I'm going to let you take it from here, but just as a quick overview, the player characters will be able to step into one of three different kinds of role, and it will be dependent upon what ability scores they want to use, and that's going to impact how effective the armies are, right?
Right.
And then there's a whole bunch of rules for training different troop types. We added a bunch more in the last episode, right, than just these ones. And the size of the, if I remember correctly, the size of the army is directly influenced by the leadership score. So we're adding a new score for the player characters, right?
So the troop size is determined by the number of soldiers that they have at their disposal. The leadership is one of the roles that they can step in. Got the commander that leads the overall army. They do the troop movements, battle formations. The lieutenant, which is the frontline commander, that's going to lead the armies into battle from the front, and then the tactician that comes up with the different kind of tactical actions or maneuvers that the army can undertake to try to get a leg up on their opponents.
That's right. And leadership will impact the morale, which we talked about, right, as well?
Right.
And so
morale is one of those crunchier stats where it's kind of influenced by a number of different things. But can have a big impact and a big swing on how the battle goes. It's a single score that can get adjusted either upward or downward based on the actions that the players take, and that's all spelled out in the actions that they're taking, right? In terms of which way it's going to move whose morale.
So armies are raised in cities, right? And so the local city that's going to be contributing these troops, the size of the city and the make of the city is going to actually impact what troops are available. to a degree, like the maximum number of troops, right, as well as a number of different like defenses if you're a defending city as well, right? And you had rules for all of these. We decided to take the economy out of it and not worry so much about how many gold per month and stuff, because we discussed it just being additional bookkeeping, that the players are probably not going to be too invested in. And so in the name of streamlining it, we were going to get rid of that. But since we've had this conversation, like you said, you've spoken to your co-DM. Did you guys keep that removed, or was there, did you reject any of the things that we discussed in the last episode?
Not really, in terms of, especially in terms of the city options, right? So one of the things that we had flagged for ourselves was, even prior to our last talk, was simplifying a little bit the city options,
Mm-hmm.
and leaning into the bastion rules that are in the DMG for the 2024. And we made some adjustments to it in terms of, we don't use the tables that are in there for random bastion events. We have our own tables based on kind of the NPCs and relationships and the broader world at large, and what's going on there.
Yeah.
For things that can and will happen that affect their bastion. And we, in the kind of name of support of some of this other stuff, are writing bounds around what influence some of the different bastion rooms. From our standpoint, right, when we talk about a bastion room in the rules, we really mean like a building or a center in their city, right?
Yes.
And what influence that might have on an overall troop efficacy or defense capability of the city or the armies that come out of it.
Yeah. So for anyone that's listening to this that did not listen to the previous episode, who was just tuning in, I think it's pretty clear to say that this is going to get a little bit crunchier. There's a little bit more math. There's a little bit more planning involved than what standard D&D brings to the table. But this is standard DM homebrewing for complicated systems like mass combat, right? We talked about trying to simplify it, because the more that you want to get into the reality and reflections of reality, the more insane this process becomes. It's funny. I was just in Maryland last month, and I met up with Robert for drinks again, because he works out of DC. And so he and Miek and I went out. That's the second time we've done that. The last time he gave me the book for Cthulhu Tech, and we ended up breaking that down this past October, about that gaming system and how it was a little bit lopsided and whatnot, but it was pretty crunchy and noodly. And he then gave me 4 books that it's going to take me a year to get through them. They are so fucking crunchy. It's a system called Imagine, and it's very much D&D or Pathfinder themed, but there's, I think, 29 spots on the body that you can do a called shot for. Each one of them has a different AC, and if you hit, it'll do a different effect, and it's so noodly. And it's a 20-year-old system, maybe even more than that, and I appreciate it for what it is. They clearly are passionate, put a lot of thought into it, but it's almost unwieldy. Like, you can't really use any of this at a table. You would have to have encyclopedic knowledge of multiple hundreds of pages of these books, and it's wild. So for the people that really like the crunch of 3.5 and Pathfinder versus 5th edition, that is beyond just a crunch. You're going to break your teeth on it. It's insane. So when we come to our own home brewing, like what we're talking about today with the mass combat and then mass combat feats, one of the things that I'm always looking for is, how can we streamline all of these great ideas into 1 or 2 mechanics that they're easy to understand and will interact well with what's already been established or within its own little tight system. And that's what we did a lot of in the previous episode, right? Was breaking down the crunch that you would come up with, because it was very detailed and it made a lot of sense. But there was a lot of how can I put this? We put spotlights on some things that got really well developed, and there were other things like I believe Constitution was one of the stats that was not taken into consideration, right? But a bunch of
Mhm.
the other ones were. So anyone that was a Constitution based class might start to get left behind. So we tried to balance that out. We tried to streamline by getting rid of the gold in the economy, that you would come up with. All of these are great ideas, and I would love to play in this game, but it's not like, the more we get into it, the further from D&D we get, the more it becomes a mini game, and the more we will start to find the little idiosyncrasies and plot holes and leaps in logic that the players will just find and either be turned off by it or exploit it, right? So I'm hoping that today with the feats, as we go through them, they should be, I've already given them a solid look, but they should be pretty streamlined. Like they're all very much in the same vein for the most part.
Mhm.
um and I love the idea of when you add an additional mechanic on top of your game, whether it is your own version of underwater combat or mass combat, or you come up with I know that some people like to come up with a codified way to do social encounters and whatnot as well. Like if you're going to do that, adding that extra level of additional feats that you can get, and it's these are, if I'm not mistaken, these are not replacement feats, right? These are additions that they get at certain points in the campaign. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So
So I love this idea of adding the feats. Did you steal that from something, or did you guys come up with that yourselves?
I don't think we stole it from anything, so much as it's one of those things where we didn't want to make people use their feat selections on it, and it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of felt natural to tie it to as they progressed through uh, their military career or appointments, right? The
Yes.
the more that they're uh, invested in trust, or the more that they make a name for themselves. Essentially, kind of you call them like renown feats if you wanted to kind of frame it that way. It's a little bit. We don't have a score that it's tied to. It's kind of more milestone based, but as they progress up the ranks, when they reach a certain level each time, they unlock the next one down the track that they identified for themselves.
If I can be perfectly honest, I think what you have here is a very interesting skeleton for an entirely separate war game as well. Like you could have a board game based on some of this if you were to extrapolate and pull some of it out, get a couple of maps or and different like game pieces and whatnot, have everybody be opposing commanders or lieutenants or tacticians, or work together against an enemy of varying difficulties or whatever. You could create a game based on what you're setting up here that's completely separate from D&D. This is fun to put on top of it, the same way that the Warriors of Kryn board game is fun to put on top of the Shadow of the Dragon Queen adventure, in fifth edition, or people. I've seen people play chess to determine the outcome of a battle. Like people have gotten creative in all sorts of different ways. So, but this one more than most others, I feel could be its own separate game. I think you've done a lot of really like fleshing it out. You need like six other kinds of leaders, right? And like you'd have to really extrapolate a bunch here, but there's a lot of the give and take and the balance, and it makes it really interesting. But let's if you have do you have any other thoughts? Do we miss anything before we jump into feats?
No, I don't think so. For the most part, uh, we covered what we did last time. A lot of the work we did was just kind of simplifying everything and tucking it in so that it's a little bit more streamlined, easier to grasp,
Yeah,
tighter in terms of the randomness.
and we talked about adding different kinds of troops as well, right? Because there might be a little bit of a rock paper scissors feel to how some of them interact with others, right? For the troop types. And like I think that this is a system that you'll probably be tweaking for multiple campaigns, like for years to come, to be like, oh yeah, back to this. But what if we did it this way, right? As you have more experience kind of play testing it at your tables. But I feel like we got to
Yeah,
a really solid foundation last session.
yeah, I agree. It helps push the maturity of it quite a bit.
So let's jump into the feats. And so just to give a quick breakdown on the feats, there are three different kinds of leaders, right? Like you said, commander, lieutenant, tactician. Each one of them, despite the notes that are on the screen, because this is the old draft from uh, before the previous episode, they all have two ability scores that are attached to what they can do, right? So that it's fairly balanced. And depending on the build of your character, you might be able to choose, say, for example, monk, you have wisdom and dexterity that are pretty high. You could probably pick a commander or a lieutenant, right?
Right.
So there's some options there for every player to feel a little bit different. You've got 4 feats per leader type, which is a total of 12 feats. Each one of the leader types has the 4 feats, but they go in order. So each one is a prerequisite for the next until you get from like level 1 all the way up to level 4. Is that right?
That's right.
Um, and the first one's commander, the second one's lieutenant, the third one's tactician. Which one would you like to start with first to get into
I mean, we've got commander up, so we can start with the commander.
All right, before we jump into it, I just want you to describe really quickly what are the vibes, the flavor, the theme that you're looking for this archetype of leader?
So when we talk about the commander, this is the man at the center, or the guy that the person at the center of the storm, right? This is the person that's coordinating all of the action. They're the ones that are moving different smaller groups from place to place. They're making the army be an army, right? As opposed to just a thousand different people running in roughly the same direction with swords.
So this is the individual that is standing in the command tent during the war, moving the pieces around on the giant map.
Right.
Okay. So let's start off with the first one that we have is the standard bearer. Do you want to run us through these, or do you want me to throw them?
I can run us through them. So
Sure.
the standard bearer is the first one, right? So that's going to have our opening prerequisite that your wisdom, or in our new write up constitution, is of at least a 13 or higher. You're going to allow you, or this feat's going to allow you to add your proficiency bonus to the morale score for any army that you're ahead of. And if you are in charge of a city that's besieged, it'll allow you to add your proficiency bonus to the starting morale of that city as well.
So this is the very basic that we're getting for the commander. When do you expect that a player at like what level, or kind of in what tier ish do you expect that a player character should have access or would gain this feat?
So this is right at the transition between tier 1 and 2, when you essentially get your first commission.
You are really moving up from a local rumor to a folk hero at about this level, right?
Yeah, if we take a glimpse through the window of the campaign that this is applied to, right? When the players got access to their first level of this, it was right after they had distinguished themselves in a major rebellion. right? And they had taken kind of independent action to cut off a supply line and backdoor into a stronghold and take out one of the rebel leaders.
So this is fun, but their proficiency bonus that they're getting at this point is going to be a +2, right? It's or sorry, a +3, I believe, at this point, which means this is a major benefit, but it is not game breaking by any means. This is not going to necessarily be the thing that sways the entire mass combat.
Yeah, and proficiency goes up slowly enough that I don't really foresee it becoming a thing where it completely breaks if things remain kind of appropriately challenged for their level, right?
Mm-hmm. And each one of these feats is going to add on to the previous one. We're not just going to double it up or say, add your proficiency bonus +2 next, right? Like there's completely new mechanics and they all stack, right?
Right. Yeah. So it basically adds on to what you can do with your army.
Okay. So I like this. This feels really level appropriate, right? Like you walking up into the command center and everyone around you is going to start whispering like, oh, hey, those are the guys that just did that, right? And so the idea of a standard bearer is someone that is inspiring the troops feels really good at this level. What's the next one we've got?
The next one in this chain is Expediter.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're especially skilled at moving the army quickly and efficiently. So it's going to let you add your proficiency bonus to the speed of your army. So you can more quickly move them around the map. And then armies within 1 square of your unit can add half of your proficiency bonus to their movements. So if you're tightly grouped, you can kind of influence how fast all of the pieces around you can move.
And the armies aren't moving at like our regular D&D speed of 30 feet around or whatever. You're talking squares on the overall world map, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So, when we talk about a piece moving, usually they're moving somewhere between 1 to 4 spaces at a time, depending on the type of unit it is. So this could be a significant enhancement to some of your slower pieces.
Specifically the slower ones, I was thinking like you're not going to get a whole lot of benefit from boosting up your flyers or your cavalry because they're just going to leave the rest of the army behind. But your siege weapons will be able to keep pace now with the cavalry, and that's like the big benefit here.
Yeah.
Right. That I think that's great because we're scaling up the level of effectiveness as far as mechanics go, like in the combat itself, which is exactly what we're looking for. So after Expediter, we've got Nimble Command. For those of you that are listening to this on the audio only medium, on YouTube, all of this is going to be up on the screen. You can follow along by looking at it. So you can jump over there and check it out. We learned our lesson last time because it was too much math and not enough notes for people. So anyway, you can head over to YouTube and check it out. But we're on to the 3rd feat now for the commander, Nimble Command.
Yeah, so for our Nimble Command, the prerequisite for this is Expediter, right? So we're moving down the chain. This is our 3rd level. And your prowess is going to inspire the action and passion of those under your command. So you can forego half of your movement speed to gain advantage on command rolls to avoid or reduce damage. So just as a reminder, all of the attacks in the mass combat are opposed rolls.
Yeah.
So when somebody tries to attack you, you can make a command roll to reduce or eliminate that the damage that they would do to your army. And also enemies that move into melee with your unit and make an attack in the same turn have to succeed a command roll of their own. The DC of that's going to be 10 plus your leadership, or the attack is a disadvantage.
Right, and leadership is one of the abilities that we've added now. Like you are a commander, so you get leadership, right? So it's part of the let's see, I have it up here on the notes. Leadership is from, like, you call it the fort leader, but specifically the commander here, right?
Yeah. So yeah, anytime that we're talking about a leadership role, leadership comes from the commander. War comes from the lieutenant, and tactics comes from the tactician.
That's right. And morale is just everybody, right? So
yeah, everybody can affect that in one way or another.
yes. So we started off with the basic morale, which anyone can affect. Now we're up to speed, and then this one seems to be focused on defense, right? So there's a real graduation um in theme here from for effectiveness, rather, for on the battlefield, right? Like it's good to keep everyone around you as happy as possible, the morale good. It's even better to be able to move quickly. It's excellent to be able to defend yourself. And then we come into masterful commander, which is next.
Yeah, so when we get to masterful command, this is the last one in the chain. So at this point, your commanding presence on the battlefield is unparalleled. You gain advantage on command rolls against any armies that are equal or less than your training level. So really, you can take advantage of armies that are poorly trained. And your army treats terrain challenges, things like moats that are dug out, wall letters that you have to climb, anything that kind of gets in your way, as difficult terrain rather than a command roll that you have to succeed in order to pass without losses. So it just slows you down a little bit. You don't lose anybody moving over them.
I cannot tell you how much that this is an overlooked method of homebrewing that people just do not seem to grasp onto, is the fact that it is so powerful and feels so good when you no longer have to roll, you just succeed. Sure, it slows you down, or it's not necessarily the most effective way of what, but you don't have to roll. There's no chance of failure anymore. You are going to do this. It's just the degree of success when you do, right? And that is such a good fucking feeling. And I love the way that the commander feats specifically have graduated from one to the next. I wanted to double check though. Standard bearer, we said, is roughly level 4 or 5. When's expediter?
So for us, expediter came in at level 8. And then kind of mid second tier.
And then nimble command.
Nimble command, they're just about to unlock that, probably at the next tier, so 11, maybe 12.
Can we assume that masterful commander is going to be at 15 just before tier 4?
Yep. Yeah, we want them to have that one for the whole tier. So
yeah, I think that is a great way of graduating it. That feels really good. It feels really natural as well. And like you said, you're not giving this at levels, you're giving it at plot points, right? They unlock it when they reach a certain portion of the campaign.
Yeah. It'll depend a little bit on kind of what they choose to pursue. So they might add some stuff that gets them character levels before they advance the full plot enough to unlock some of this stuff. But
that's awesome.
I would say by 15 is really safe to say masterful command is going to be that 4th tier is going to be under their belt.
Now, I love everything you have set up here. However, I have one critique, and that is the titles are not a natural progression, because you have standard bearer, which describes a person, expediter, which describes a person, and nimble command and masterful command, which describes things a person does, right? I was hoping to see like it be like nimble commander, masterful commander, but we should come up with like better, more evocative names. And you can sit down and work with your co-DM on these if you'd like. But the idea of having the standard bearer become the expediter, and then like maybe the defender, or even the last one could just be like, what do we have? You have advantage on command rolls for masterful commander against any armies that are equal to or less than your training level. Like it could be master of the battlefield or something, right? just to make it a descriptor of the person. It's their title, and nimble command is not a title, right? It's just a thing that they can do. And so that is such a
That's a good
minor
note.
nitpicky note, but I think it'll make it feel a little bit more cohesive, right?
I mean, the titles were all first pass, so I'm not I'm not offended by changing those.
All right. I just feel like you should either make it a thing that they can do, like we have with a lot of other feats, where it's just like um you'll notice that in all the other feats, it's a thing that you are like that. There's not a whole lot of because I'm thinking like your crossbow expert, right? Your
Mhm.
uh, uh why am I drawing a blank? Oh, it's because I don't know all of the 5.5 feats yet, but like there are a bunch. But then there are other ones that are just like alert, right? Which is not what you are. It's not who you are, it's what you are. And it drives me up the wall that there's no real like cohesion between the names of the different feats that you get. um so I this is just a tweak that I would make for myself. It just makes it feel better to have like maybe this be an official title, and you just theme it all on that. Like your standard bearer could be, you know, um corporal, and then up to captain, and then up to, you could go with that
Yeah.
that kind of ranking system, or you could find a medieval version of it, right? Or you could go, naval or whatever. So and then land on general or admiral or whatever from there, right? So um or you could stick with you have masterful command, nimble command, and then like the one before that would be quick command and popular command or something, right? Like you could go either direction on this, but it is my weird little nitpicky note because I think the rest of this feels really good. This, specifically the commander feats, is what got me the most excited about your mass combat system in the first place. Like I like all the rest of it,
You know,
but this was fun. This was neat. So, do you have any other final thoughts before we move on to the lieutenant feats?
uh, no, I don't think so. I like the idea of kind of making the naming conventions more cohesive. So,
All right, I'm going to scroll down to the lieutenant.
alrighty.
Um, Before we get into it, I wanted to ask, do you think your players would feel less important if one person's called a commander, another one's called a lieutenant, and the last one's called a tactician? Because commander holds a lot of power and respect, and lieutenant is look, lieutenant is high enough on the totem pole to command respect as well, but it's not up there with general. You know what I mean? So despite the fact like we are getting it's interesting on this one, all the titles that you have, fierce charger, duelist, mighty warrior, and war god, they are all titles, right? But
Yeah.
the moment you get to mighty warrior and war god, that doesn't feel like lieutenants anymore. Right. um so it's
Yeah.
interesting to try to find the balance in the naming conventions while we're still talking about that.
Yeah, well, I think lieutenant is kind of the weaker of the names on there too, right? It's just one of those. I didn't want to use field or frontline commander because commander is already in the titling there. Maybe officer. Uh, I it's I'm open to suggestions on lieutenant. I'm not worried about the egos in the at the table. Fortunately enough, we've been a lot of us playing together for oh my god, 20, 25 years, depending on which person you're talking about.
Good lord.
So we've
um
gotten through most of those issues.
my longest, like the player that I've been DMing the longest consecutively has been Casey, and that's been since 2017. So I'm on like 8 years, and that feels like an eternity. Like we've been doing this for so long, even though I had like Dave and Dan back like 20 years ago. We just took major breaks in the middle. 25 consecutive years is insane to me.
I don't like to do the math too often, but yeah, it's getting. I think it's 23 technically since we started playing.
That's still too much.
But yeah, it's been a long time, and people come and go. I think
Yeah.
there are folks at that table. We've been playing this campaign for about 2 years now, so there are some folks at the table who started more recently. But even I think, yeah, even the shortest term person was probably at about 4 years now.
It's wild, hey. Like, yeah, my shortest term
Yeah.
person, not including Mieka who comes and goes, but like my shortest term person is at year 4 as well. It's you start to feel a little long in the tooth.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Had these tables together longer than I've stayed at any one job.
okay, if we have sorry, back to the feats. Um instead of it being commander, why not make it warrior? Because that puts them more like in the shit, right?
Yeah,
A commander is someone who stands back and makes these large decisions for the overall army. They're the overseer, but the warrior is shoulder to shoulder with the soldiers, and that's the feel you're looking for here for the lieutenant feats, right?
yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely.
And again, you could like if you just use the word commander. If I hold on, I'll scroll back up for a sec, and like and make them all like inspiring commander, expeditious commander, nimble commander, masterful commander, and then the next one for the lieutenant, we would call them all warriors. So it's like charging warrior, dueling warrior, mighty warrior, godlike warrior. You know what I mean? Like, and then when we get to the tactician, they could all be different kinds of tacticians as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's not super inspired, but it is cohesive, and your guys will feel like I'm the commander and I'm the warrior, right? Like in the end, they will just gain power as that. It's almost like an additional feeling of a bonus subclass that you get.
yeah.
Instead,
I like that, and I
yeah,
do miss subclasses. So.
yeah. So, um, so let's look at these feats first. We're starting off with you've got Fierce Charger listed here.
Yes. So Fierce Charger allows you to add your proficiency to the war bonus of any army where you're serving as the lieutenant or the warrior now. And previously, it was going to allow you to add to the war score of a fort or city, but we kind of nixed that piece of it, right? Because ultimately, this is all about being on the battlefield, and anytime you're on the battlefield, you're going to be a part of the army. So any influence that you're having at this point is going to be army side.
So, what is the actual use for the war score? Just run us through this again. We talked about it last episode, but just for context,
So
what's
you're
the
going to
overall
use
theme?
the war score as your basically attack modifier. So the warrior, the front line command really is the one that you're rolling the dice to do the damage to your opposing forces.
Okay. So, in this specific instance, you're adding a proficiency bonus to the war score, which is your to hit, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you've also got it as Fierce Charger. What you don't have anywhere on here is the speed at which you're moving. Is there some way that we can lump speed in at this level?
What we could do is because for the most part the commander is the one that moves the pieces around,
Mm-hmm.
but the charger could give basically an extra square of attack range to stand in for your ability to charge forward, right?
Yeah, we could do that. Or I'm trying to think about some way to affect the morale of the others, right? Like because those are our bottom two things that we could do as a commander. So that's kind of the area that we're in. And if we're talking about fierce and charging and whatnot, then it might just be like the morale score or roll or whatever of the opposing force is at disadvantage, right? Or has a penalty to it. You can just give it a standard -2. So it's not always leaning on the advantage or disadvantage mechanic. It might feel a little bit more flavorful to say, is has a negative equal to your proficiency bonus for the morale or something like that.
What if after you make a successful movement, right? So if or after you make a successful attack, if you've moved in the same turn, also affecting morale that way.
Yeah, I like that. That's going to be beneficial the entire campaign. So that's the first one. I like that. It's a really good base. The next one, you talk about being a duelist. Now, being a duelist, we talked about duels in, oh god, it was a few episodes ago now, right? Like it's 2 or 3 back now, because you have your own separate rules for dueling, and people can go listen to that episode. But the idea here is that you are, as you're a warrior, you're essentially calling out the opposing warriors and saying, you and me right here, middle of the battlefield.
Yeah. So at this point, you double your proficiency bonus to any weapon attacks during duels, and dueling is a secondary kind of mechanic for us, right? We've got essentially a rock paper scissors roll off that we do for dueling. I think we covered that 2 episodes ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is going to allow you to, anytime you're in a duel, you're especially proficient in one-on-one battles, right? So you're doubling your proficiency bonus when you're fighting against just one person. And when you challenge an opposing officer to a duel and they decline, so if they're afraid to duel you, then their army is going to lose morale. It's going to lose 1 morale.
Is that enough, or should it be like half of your proficiency modifier rounded down? Because when you are, level 17, 1 morale doesn't feel impactful enough.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that change.
I really like this. Getting the 2, I mean, we've seen it in every freaking sword war movie for the last 25 years, whether it is Braveheart or anything like that, Lord of the Rings. The moment that there's a sword in an army and you've got your hero, he's going to find the big bad enemy boss on the field and fight them directly, right? And it's going to be the 2 of them clashing hard against each other. This feels really, really good and cinematic. I really like this. That brings us up
to one of the things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. I was gonna say it's one of the things that we really wanted to add for an extra depth to this, the lieutenant or the warrior group, right? Rather than just that martial feel of old 5 edition where I swing and I hit and I swing and I hit and I swing and I hit, and that's the only thing that I can do. This gives them another level that they can engage the battlefield on.
This is really going to make the big difference, in my opinion, between your battle master, your monk, your ranger, who might be sitting back in the tent being a commander, and your barbarian, your champion fighter, your hexblade warlock could be a duelist on the front line, right? Calling it the enemy. Like, there's a very different vibe, and I'm all for it. I really like it. This is where I would find a lot of paladins would want to be as well. Yeah. So the next up is Mighty Warrior.
So at this point, we're going to amplify what you can do. So your prowess is going to inspire action and passion. Half of your war score is going to be added to any damage inflicted by your army. So anytime you make an attack, you're going to do extra damage in that attack. And then when your army defeats an opposing army, or when you win a duel, your army gets an additional. I've got 1 morale point, but that's probably again half proficiency rounded down, right?
Because it's an inspiration. So, for the debuffs, I would round down. For the buffs for your own guys, I'd round up. Like, you're going to be getting this late enough in the game that the difference between a +3 and a +4, or +2 and a +3, which is more likely, that I don't think you can get a +4 in proficiency, but like when you're dealing with halves. But like, if you're dealing with, like, give them the full +3. If they've got proficiency, it'll be either +2 or +3. I just round up. There's no point when you're at proficiency bonus +5 on your character sheet. You should be getting a +3 at this point, right? Like, you're level what, 11, 12?
Yeah. I mean, fair enough.
It part of the reason as well is I'm looking to add variety in the different kinds of bonuses you're getting, so it doesn't feel like the same thing over and over and over and over again. Because that's why I find a lot of feats feel boring to me, because it's choose one skill of your choice and you can move 5 feet, or choose one skill of your choice and you get a cantrip, or choose one skill of your choice. Like, yes, I fucking get it. Just say for these ones you get a skill of your choice and then give me the fucking thing. Like, you could have mixed this up and made it more interesting. Instead, you're just kind of hitting the same mechanic over and over again. And it's, as someone that's been running a podcast now for like 6 years, there are some of those episodes where we did feats is one of them, magic items is another, where we just are essentially doing lists and talking about, there's this one thing and then there's a very similar thing that is very close to it, but it is slightly different in this way, and now there is a third thing that is very similar to it. And my god, it becomes like the books start to feel like they're bloated with unnecessary words, because you could have just said all these things are the same, except this one is stealth, that one is acrobatics, this one's perception, right? Oh shit, okay, thanks, I get it now, I can move on, instead of taking up a half page on this dumb shit. So I'm always looking to break up the monotony while not really fucking up the balance of it, right? And so that's really my motivating factor. And I don't think it's going to matter too much. That's why I say round up versus round down. Rounding down, or you could round up on the debuff and round down on the buff. But I just find, like, players like doing more damage, players like having the good things be better, right?
Yeah.
So that everyone's always
focused on more effective.
Yeah, right. Like, they want to focus on the attack and the feel good. If I have a choice between giving someone +1 to attack and damage or +1 to AC, 9 times out of 10 they'll take attack and damage just because it feels better. You know what I mean? So some not just keeping.
I mean, yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on to War God.
Yeah. So at this point, your prowess is unparalleled. You have advantage on attacks against any armies that are equal to or less than your training level. So keep it on that theme there. And then when you defeat an opponent in a duel, the army they are leading must pass a leadership contest against your war, or suffer 2 damage dice as soldiers flee and panic.
Beauty. I really like that. I like, no notes. This one is great. This one,
yeah, I feel like that's one of the ones that, like, I was pretty happy with. I feel like when you have that and you succeed and you beat somebody in a duel, it feels pretty good to now make 200 of their guys run away because you walloped their leader so hard.
Yeah, it's funny because you're missing the word in the actual breakdown here. When you defeat an opponent in A,
oh,
it's just a typo.
Yeah.
But like, sitting on the edge of my seat wondering what that noun is going to be.
It's a duel.
Thank God it's not a hot dog eating contest. So how do we feel then about this? I guess we're gonna call it the warrior now. Like, I feel like we're doing very, very little tweaks on these ones. The commander felt way more fun the first time I ran across it. Now that we've just even rebranded this as a warrior, it feels, I don't know, beefier somehow.
Yeah, I think warrior hits the note a little bit better than lieutenant does.
Yeah.
I think that was a good change.
Which are we ready to move on to the tactician?
Sure.
All righty. So tactician feats. This is another one that's like tactician, that's a person, advisor is a person, mastermind is a person, tactical artistry is not a person, right? So it's another one that you'd have to come up with some sort of cohesiveness when it comes to the titles. And it's also where I'm getting the idea of like the tactician should be like the word tactician should be in each one of the names. Like the last one's masterful tactician and the skilled tactician, right? Like if you wanted to go that way, if you call all of the commanders something commander and all of the warriors something warrior, then this should be the something tactician. If you want to go in that route. But for anyone that's paying attention to these prerequisites and whatnot about intelligence 13 or higher, we actually changed it so that every one of them, because commander only had wisdom and lieutenant had strength and dex, and tactician has intelligence on these notes that we're looking at now. But in the last episode, we changed them. They all have two different things and like two different ability scores, and none of them repeat, so that there's something for every kind of class build, right?
Yeah. We shifted things around a little bit in order to make sure that everybody's particular strength was nabbed here.
Mm-hmm.
So intelligence is probably still the main score that you're looking at for your tactician, but this one is the one that remains, intelligence and charisma.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say we added charisma to this, right? So
yeah.
So we're starting off with, for the first tactician feat, we have tactician. This name needs an upgrade.
Yeah, that's one that to rename, I think. But this one lets you add your proficiency bonus to the tactics score of an army where you're serving as a tactician, and your proficiency score, it was to the defense value of any city. Well, no, it is now. Add your proficiency score to the defense value of any city where you are stationed as an advisor. So anything that you set, if you've got a wall in place, if you've got whatever defensive structures that you've identified, in addition to whatever your standard tactical role would give you for that, you're also adding your proficiency bonus.
So run me through it again. What is your tactics score?
So your tactics score is just like with war or with leadership, the combination of the relevant skills.
Yeah.
So for us, that's your intelligence and your charisma modifier in the tactician.
And when do you actually apply it in the game? If it's not frontline, but it's not troop movement, when are we using this?
So for tactics, there are two ways that it's applied. One of those is to set your DC for things like traps or kind of tactical elements. So if you add barriers, if you add anything that's meant to manipulate the battlefield in any way, you're going to have a DC that's set based on your tactics score, and that's going to be the same way that you would calculate a DC for any other thing, 8 plus whatever the relevant tactical score is. So we just wanted to make sure that wasn't lost if you were in charge of doing that for the city as well. It's not just going to be for an army that you're a part of. It's also for if you are advising that city and you're setting it up for the siege. Your score, your DC is going to be the thing that carries that over, so you're not as limited, or it's not an oversight, I guess, on our part for that.
I feel like the tactician is not just tactics, but also overall strategy as well, right?
Yeah.
Like the commander is very much about the execution of the strategy, and the warrior is about the outcome of the execution, right? But the strategy is where the tactician is coming into play here, right? The difference for, I know we have a couple of non English speaking listeners, or they're not natively English anyway. The difference between strategy and tactics is that strategy is for the overall plan, and tactics is about the specific actions. So the strategy would be, we should set up traps, and the tactic is, we'll set them up at the gate here and over by the path on the bridge there, and like it's the specifics are the tactician, and the overall strategy is kind of the by the broad strokes, right? So but I feel like for our purposes in this conversation, this tactician feels like they're doing both, which is really good. That's really cool. It adds a little bit of depth and makes them more relevant instead of just, because like, are they standing in the command tent too?
Yeah, typically I would envision them essentially next to the commander, right?
Yeah.
So they're coming up with plans, with ideas to be implemented in the army, and then theoretically that's all flowing through the commander. But it's this is where those maneuvers are being developed or designed from your
This
tactician.
this is the we're looking for the synergy between the commander and the tactician that you would get between like the military and the political advisors, or depending on your campaign, it might be the military and the like religious advisors that are working together, and they both have the king's ear, right, about what to do, and they're working together. But the tactician is a little bit more the king's hand from Game of Thrones and a little bit less like Jafar, right? Because Jafar is
Yes.
not going to be out there setting traps or overseeing troops of any sort, right?
Yeah, he's a little bit more than just a political advisor. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. That's a lot of it, but he's also going to be known to the troops, right? He's gonna get his hands dirty sometimes. So after the
Yeah,
tactician,
yeah.
after the tactician feat, we're then into skilled advisor.
So skilled advisor is leaning into that public or political advisor role. That's part of what they do. That's going to double your proficiency bonus in your persuasion or deception bonus during debates. Debates are kind of the social analog to the duels. They rely on a similar system, but using the mental stats. I think we covered that in the same episode that we covered duels.
Yes, we did.
And then once per debate, you can re-roll a check and take the higher result.
Oh, that's all right.
So in this case, right, and I think we talked a little bit about it during the debate section of that episode. This gives the character an opportunity to kind of sway or move things if there's another character or NPC that might disagree with the action. It just has a mechanical element to sway which way kind of the person that you're trying to convince will go, right? Who makes the stronger argument here?
Yes. Honestly, my only note here is that you should add intimidation to this as well, because a well-placed subtle threat, whether it's truth or a lie, can be just as effective as you know any other method. It's funny, I never liked intimidation as a skill, because you're either telling the truth or like, I'm going to break your knees. Well, that could be persuasion or deception, right? Like it could be either one of the other ones, right? So but I would say add intimidation. I could even make an argument for performance in a debate getting a bonus if you are particularly skilled in not what you're saying but how you're saying it, or insight, when you just figure out what the actual point of your enemy's argument is before they make their big point. You could undermine it in some way, right? Like, you could add more things here, but I think you really only need intimidation.
Yeah, and we talked, we did talk about that during that that
Yes.
episode too.
Yeah.
Adding those other social roles into it.
Yeah.
You know, I've also been a big intimidation is 8 times out of 10 better served as a kind of a prowess role as opposed to a social role.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I,
It's one
I
of my
feel like
favorite things from fifth edition that I couldn't find the rule for it in the new player's handbook or the new dungeon master's guide. But one of my favorite things was you can use any ability score. Like, it always says make a wisdom and then in brackets perception check, right? Like, I feel like it's a charisma and in brackets persuasion or intimidation. But in fifth edition, you can replace that with any one of the ability scores. You want to do an intimidation check, but use strength as your modifier by flexing your muscles while you grin at them. Yeah, that could work. Make that roll. I love that. And so when it comes to things like performance, maybe it's a dex roll, right? Intimidation might be an intelligence roll because you have figured out, the thing that scares them the most, right? So I miss that, and I wish that it could be like you're still playing in fifth edition rules, right?
yeah, we're still in fifth edition rules, and I don't know that I assume it's still in 5.5 that that's the way that it works. But regardless, that's the way it'll always work at my table, because there are times when the outline skill just doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I know there was a little feat. I think was it an orc feature maybe that let you use your strength in place of charisma or intimidation. But for me, basically any time that you've got like the barbarian uh, flexing and like looming over an opponent to intimidate them, that's a strength intimidation more than it's a charisma intimidation, right? They're not using their charisma. There's no subtlety involved here.
Absolutely. And I keep thinking, like, you're in the bar and the guy looks over at you and like smashes the beer bottle on his own head. I'm like, all right, constitution intimidation, let's go. Right? Like, there are all sorts of ways to do this. I'm with you. I will always have that as a rule at my table, but I don't remember seeing it. I went through the player's handbook with a pretty fine-tooth comb, and I'm hoping I just missed it. But I don't believe that is still something that they get into in the PHB. It might be in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There were a lot of rules in DMG, but
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it was there, or even honestly, if it's something that like Crawford or Perkins just kind of like offhandedly talked about and just got adapted into the community. But I mean, there's nothing that would have stopped me from doing that. That's one of those things where like just the obstinance in my soul would have been like, no, we're going to use strength for this role. We're going to use constitution for this role or wisdom for this role.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It's just silly to do it any other way.
All right, back on topic because we're getting rambly. Tactical artistry is the third rank here.
Yeah, so this is back to focus on the battlefield, and it's going to let you add half of your tactic score to any damage that's inflicted to armies by your maneuvers, and it's going to double your proficiency bonus when you're setting traps on the battlefield.
Now, do you have a specific mechanic for traps? I don't remember. Did we talk about that in the last episode?
Yes, we did. So anytime you set a trap, it's essentially the same as setting a defense, right? What it's going to do is it's going to basically lay a square or a series of squares on the battlefield that if an opponent crosses, they trigger a tactics or command roll on their on their army, or they befall whatever that trap is.
And so when you're adding your proficiency bonus and now you're going to double it, that is the DC they have to beat?
Yeah, so it's going to be 8 plus
perfect
whatever your tactics score is.
Yeah.
And then it's going to let you double your proficiency when you create that. So it's going to make that command roll even more difficult to overcome.
Excellent. Yeah. I scrolled to the part in the document. I went, oh yeah, right. I remember going over this now. So, okay. I like this. This is, again, I feel like we are graduating at a very natural state from one feat to the next, right? This feels very solid. And that brings us to Mastermind.
All right. Yep. At this point, they're renowned for their tactical mastery. You have advantage on tactics rolls against armies that are equal or less than your training. And then your tactics roll best to your opponent by at least 5 or more. You strike fear into their ranks. Attacks against your army will be at disadvantage until the end of their next turn, and they will suffer 1 die of damage as soldiers panic and flee the field. That's a update we made when we were talking through our discussions last time.
I like it. I love.
We read through we just felt like there needed to be a little bit more oomph on the mastermind, so we added that. Just a little extra damage on that.
No, that feels really good. Again, this feels like what it should. Like it's the end of tier 3, beginning of tier 4. All of your guys, in one way or another, are essentially acting as a general, as the war hero for everyone else to kind of rally around, right? To band together for.
Exactly.
Every one of them are a major inspiration. And we often think about that in Dungeons and Dragons. We talk about inspiration because we look at like bardic inspiration and heroic inspiration and the giving these bonuses to our players, because again, it feels good to get things. But some of my favorite moments in gameplay is when the enemy gets inspired to run the fuck away, when they get the opposite of inspired, right? When one of our recurring NPCs across 3 campaigns now he was a goblin that's been like possessed by or not possessed, imbued by a snake god, and there were a bunch of these goblins, and this one was like one of the last ones in the final room to fight against the heroes. And Casey's character, she was a monk, in one turn decimated 4 of his friends. And so he sat there and looked at her and said, you know what, fuck it, you're my new god. I'm just gonna get on my knees and I'm gonna swear fealty to you because you win and you're better than that guy and I love you and please don't kill me. And so he has followed the party around and been like an advisor and shit ever since. And it's been a lot of fun because it was the opposite kind of inspiration that we're used to seeing. So I love the idea of hitting the enemy's morale and making them flee. That feels so good. I always come back to the Star Wars A New Hope moment with Han Solo charging at the stormtroopers, and there are more of them than him. There's like 5 of them, and they're running away, and you're like, wow, it's a really fun feel good moment. And then he turns the corner and there's 100, and then he turns around and runs. Like, okay, that's funny, but that feels even better, right? Like that is a cathartic moment for the audience to sit here and be invested and involved and have payoff to these emotions. And so having enemies flee in front of you, as much as I always say do the buff and not the debuff because it feels better, enemies retreating feels really good in D&D, especially if you are breaking up the combat and you're going to come to a faster resolution, right?
Yeah, and ultimately that's the goal here, right? Is to do bigger and a more impactful damage to the armies, and give them more options and more levers to pull on in order to perform that. So hopefully they can take advantage of stronger and more effective armies as they progress in difficulty.
Okay, I don't have any more notes on this because I think we talked mostly like the big changes are a couple of little noodly mechanics and then like the naming convention, right? Because when it comes to additional mechanics, here's my final thought on it. When it comes to additional mechanics that you're adding to your game, they have to be functional, they have to be logical, and they have to be, most importantly, consistent. It has to be, if you're adding a homebrew mechanic, your players have to be able to accept it as if it is equal to any other rule provided by the base game, right? It either has to be equal to or better than. They have to like it and they have to want to use it. It has to feel good. If it doesn't, if it's not consistent, then they will fall out of love with this idea and they'll not want to use it. And then when it's time to bring up your homebrew thing, you're going to run into the time that I brought up my 7 pages of notes on trade routes to my table, and they looked at me, their eyes glazed over, as I'm handing out these pamphlets, these multi-page pamphlets to everyone, and I realized not one of them gives a shit. I spent like 2 weeks on this, and I came up with this intricate trade route system, and they don't care. It doesn't feel good. They're not getting enough benefit out of it. They're not feeling like heroes. It's not why they showed up today to play, right? They're not here to play fucking Merchant Simulator. As realistic as I was trying to make it be, and as fun and interesting, and rock, paper, scissors, and there's all these things. Your homebrew for mass combat feels good. It feels right, and it is consistent. There are little tweaks here and there, but most of it is for balance so that the players don't get discouraged, or for vibe so that they stay encouraged, right? And that's kind of the big thing. That's why we homebrew in the first place. One of the things that I fucking hate is underwater combat. I always bring it up whenever I talk about homebrewing because it's bullshit in D&D. And so I come up with my own rules for it, and my players understand it. But whenever someone starts talking about underwater combat, I fucking zone out. I've listened to other podcasts and watched YouTube channels and stuff where they break it down, and they're like, "Oh, it's kind of neat and fun," and they're just smelling the farts of the designers on this one, because it doesn't make sense. It's horseshit. It's nonsense and garbage.
It's one of it. I mean, that's the hardest one. One of the tables I have, so we're doing a different game right now, is all but a pirate campaign.
Yeah,
they won't call themselves pirates, but it's a pirate campaign. And
they're privateers, are they?
Yeah, well, they're privateers without authorization. But
I'm sorry, that is a great name for a fucking campaign. Like you've got the Mighty Nine and Vox Machina and Acquisitions Incorporated and privateers without authorization. That's really funny.
I mean, it is a great name for a game. We called it Boat Stuff, which is probably worse.
If that just doesn't sum up the attitude of D&D players, though. I love it. I'm sorry, you were about to rant about underwater shit.
Oh, I mean, but that's the hardest thing for me, right? Is adding that in there, because it's so clunky, trying to do it and like make it feel as desperate as it should, while being like viable.
Yeah, that's my big thing too. Is like, if you've got a verbal component underwater, I know this has nothing to do with your mass combat, but if you have a verbal component of casting a spell underwater, you go right ahead and cast it, but you are now out of air.
Yeah.
Right. And like,
right.
That should be a part of the rules. That makes perfect sense. It's going to limit spellcasters in a big way. And yet you can still get off those big spells in important ways if you need to, right? Like, everything becomes more dramatic when you're underwater, which is, I think, accurate. But We don't have that. So everybody I know, like it's not just me, everyone I know homebrews the underwater shit. And sometimes the players get excited because it feels more dangerous. They get around waist deep water and suddenly grapples become a major factor. And everyone thinks, cool, we get to do this thing now. But then there's others where that the table just kind of shrugs and says, guys, let's just not go near the coast. Let's head inland to the desert. Fuck this noise. Like I just don't want to deal with it. Even though they have homebrew mechanics, they're not inspired. They don't give a shit, right? I like the stuff that you come up with, specifically the feats. It's my favorite part of it all because it feels really good. A lot of the other stuff, and if you're looking at the screen, you can see the math involved in some of this. And while math is, like I was talking earlier about this, the clunky, crunchy game that Robert gave me called Imagine, that I'm going to have to go through for a year to figure it out. The math might be realistic. It might be a good representation, and it might even be necessary, but it doesn't feel good, right? It feels good
Yeah,
to
and some
resolve
of
math. It doesn't feel good to bust out a calculator at a D&D table, right? And that's not true for everybody. Some people love math. I myself love math, but I acknowledge the fact that complicated multiplication and division is not why we showed up for D&D, right? So unless it is at your table, at which point more power to you, go nuts.
I mean, it was for me, but I feel like I'm the 1% of you know,
it was it was for me during 3.5, and when I got
yeah,
into fourth edition, I was very, very into homebrewing and making it make sense. But since I've started playing in fifth edition, I've become more narrative and less mechanics focused. I'm
yeah,
far more likely now to say follow like the rule of cool. Whereas
yeah,
before I would make you make it make sense, but with math, right? How does this stack up against a +3 modifier? Like that, and that's, I'm not sure why my players are showing up, right? So um but like I say, you've got math, you've got rules for a lot of it, and by math I just mean like there's equations to be figured out. How far does the infantry move, what's their range, all that shit, that's still math, right? All of the different sizes of their for each one of the troop types, and timesing it by a leadership score and all that stuff, that is necessary and it's fine, but it's the feats that we really want to be interacting with as players, because that's where the fun is, right? That feels
hmm
better. And that's the difference.
and
Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's one of the things that I think is I try to pull as much of this back as I can when it comes to presenting this to the players. One thing I definitely don't do is drop the Word doc on them like I did to you, Adam. So
Fair,
sorry.
yeah. it's
that is,
it's
here's
intimidating to
how the
people.
mechanics work from soup to nuts.
Yeah.
Um, but I have little cards that are everything, right? So um, I have I have a little card for each, like just like literal card, little laminated cards that they can grab onto. We've got one for actually the built armies, so you can fill in all the numbers that you're rolling against, like little character sheets for the battles themselves. I have ones that like uh, outline what the different troop types do,
Mhm.
so that they can kind of pick what they want to put where, and assemble their army as they want to without necessarily having to scroll through everything. They have little compact um, one page or handheld items that they can kind of sort through and choose from. It's one of the I try not to dump spreadsheets and full like workouts in front of players at this point in my DM career. I try to keep as much of that behind the screen as possible. I love tracking everything to the most minute detail in my little spreadsheets. But I don't think they need they need that in their face all the time.
I think you were the only person besides Scott and I that were excited about an episode about spreadsheets. So like I feel you on that one. But one of the things that I had to do because I had some, how can I put this, doubtful players when I first started DMing for my group in 5th edition. I hadn't earned their trust yet. I'd been a player with them, but I hadn't earned my place as a dungeon master. So when it was time to start homebrewing and to go off book on stuff, they didn't necessarily trust that I had their best interests in mind, because everyone has heard stories about adversarial DMs. And it was early enough in 5th edition that's still like it was an echo from 3.5 and 4th edition. When you're reading online, it was still a little bit player versus DM, right? Instead of player and DM.
Yeah.
And so I ended up providing spreadsheets and documents and handouts all of the time. When they said, hey, what's this shopkeeper's name? And I said, give me 1 sec to look it up. I have an answer for this. I did that 5 or 6 times, and then they stopped asking because it doesn't really matter. Like, they're not staying at the shop for very long. They just said, okay, I'm going to go talk to the shopkeeper. They didn't need to know the backstory of them because they believed enough in the world. They trusted me as a DM, and I'd shown my work before. Like I had provided the math. And so they acknowledged the fact that I knew what I was talking about. Anytime that I hand out now, it is to inspire, enhance, or inform. Like, here's a little cue card with all the details that you need to know about your new magic item. Cool. That enhances and informs, but it does not set out to educate, right? And that's what my spreadsheets and the clunky math and the big Word documents are. This is the education behind it. This is the formula. And players don't need the formula, they need the answer. When they need to do the formula, they don't want to learn how to do it. They want you to say, so take 8 and then add, sorry, what level are you? Okay, so you're adding 4 because that's your proficiency modifier to the 8. So you have a 12. And they're just going to keep in their head 12 because that's the number they need. And if they trust you as a dungeon master, then because you have, like I said, consistency, and it makes sense within the world, and it feels good, then this is going to be a system that you can use at your table. Everything that you've got going on here, like I say, you'll probably still need to tweak and balance. You'll use this for years and find different aspects to and from. One of the things that we didn't apply to any of this is, can you use this mass combat for naval or airship warfare? It may come to that in a future campaign, at which point you're going to rework the whole fucking thing over again. But it will, like, you and your co-DM are trusted, right? You are in a position where you can add these things, and the feats are the window dressing that make the players feel powerful and make them feel good. And that's why I fucking love this system that you've got. And it's the difference between this and the other mass combat systems I've seen, which are just moving a bunch of tokens around, sometimes even just dice. Like, oh, there are 800 troops, so my D10 has an 8 on it, and it represents 1 battalion over here, something like that, right? Like, I've seen that, but none of it feels good. It's not your character.
Yeah.
It's the player playing a strategy game, and that's not why you show up for D&D. Again, asterisks, unless of course it is, and then go nuts, right? But it's not why most people show up, not in 2025. So I gotta say,
yeah, and
no, go ahead.
That was the whole conceit, right? Is, we were definitely inspired by games that we played when we were younger, but the whole conceit here was, we want to be able to find a way to do this in a way that feels kind of good, but doesn't just hand wave too much. And we don't want to spend, like, Warriors of Kryn is a cool idea, right?
Yeah,
I applaud the idea, but the implementation of it, right? I'd have to spend, if I played that campaign, or DM'd that campaign, and we got to one of those big battles, I would have to spend 2 hours before that session setting up that battle, setting up that game, and I would enjoy it. But man, the work,
right. And
setting up that board game,
that's
play
2 hours.
one battle.
That's 2 hours setting it all up and getting it ready. you've not included the learning curve for the players, because
Yeah,
it's only as fun as the last person that gets it, right?
yeah, yeah.
So
It's a lot, right? It's a lot. So it's only for very specific groups. It's only for like very specific circumstances. It's only really going to be applicable in that one setting. So as cool as it is, I wanted something that you could kind of lift and shift as you needed to. Like I said, we have 2 DMs, right? So even if somebody doesn't want to participate or doesn't want to do like this version of it, and they want to do something else on their own, or a small group wants to go and accomplish their own tactic, we can split off and do that.
yeah.
It gives us more flexibility than the whole ass board game did.
And I guess that's my final thing before we wrap this episode up is I gotta throw kudos out to you guys, you two specifically that have been working on this, because I myself have tried to design mass combat on a number of different occasions, and it has always fallen flat. I think that you guys have struck gold with looking at not only the crunch and the mechanics, but the in-world consistency, the balance. Does it make sense as far as lore and theme, but also as far as the math? You are still working on the balance, and like I say, that will be a lifelong endeavor, right? Like it'll be a long ass time before you say, yes, this system is perfect, it is closed. But the thing that you did was you added the feats. You made it so that once it was all said and done, you remembered this is for the players at the table to engage with. It's not my theory crafting on how armies should be reacting on a field, right? And that's why this feels so fucking great. So, do you have any final thoughts, or people, social media, or projects, anything you'd like to mention?
No social media. I don't really do that outside of Discord. I guess join the It's Mig Patreon and get on the Discord, and then you can talk to me there. But other than that, that's really all I do. My projects are all for the people who pay me.
Fair enough.
to avoid their worst possible days. So that's I don't have anything specific there. Just have fun.
Awesome. Well, that's all for this discussion on mass combat feats. Thank you, Gerald, for choosing this topic, workshopping your homebrew, and supporting the Patreon. And thanks to everyone else for listening to another episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, we have a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com, a store with some It's a Mimic merch, and a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. That's all for this Platinum Greatwyrm episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, subscribe, comment, or review to help push our engagement. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com. You can also head to itsamimic.com to find a comprehensive episode guide and more information about the show. We do have a Patreon, which not only offers access to our exclusive Discord server, but also hosts over 100 episodes, including a variety of bonus episodes covering topics like 5th edition book reviews and the campaign builder, spells and gods, fae, homebrew inspiration, and even the Blood War. If you'd like to submit any mailbag questions, please reach out to us through any of the social media links in the show notes of this episode, or send us an email at info@itsamimic.com. This has been an episode of It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.